9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Rothkopf, your host. And as you know, every so often we have a book that we think you should read. And one that I've been looking forward to talking to you about for a long time now is by our guest, the famed host of the PoliticsGirl podcast, Leigh McGowan. How are you, Leigh?
I'm good. I'm really good. Today my book comes out. It's first book ever, so that's pretty exciting.
Well, having a book come out is a big deal. Having a good book come out is rare, and you've done it. You've started out with a good book. It's called A Return to Common Sense, How to Fix America Before We Really Blow It. And it's great. It's just like your podcast. It cuts right to the core. It's accessible. It's smart. And it's what we need right now.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that. I actually can't believe how on the zeitgeist this book is going to end up being. It's pretty funny because you pitch a book. I did it last summer, and then I wrote the book in the winter. And I was talking about things like Project 2025 when no one was talking about it, right? I was like, this is something we should look at. This isn't something that we should be just passing over. And now where we are coming right up to this election, it's hitting all the things that we need to be talking about. And that's why I do this work in the first place. So we're talking about the right things at the right time, and we can understand them in their entirety so we can start fixing them.
Yeah, and I have to say, I vouch for the fact that Leigh is prescient on many things. She and I had a lunch a few months ago, and we sat together and we said, wouldn't it be great if Kamala Harris were the candidate?
Don't tell anyone. We were already thinking ahead.
Yeah, look how that turned out. Pretty good so far, right?
Pretty good so far. Honestly, look, I stayed as a Biden stan the whole way along because I really felt it had to be his decision. I really do think he's been an excellent president, but the way it happened, the way he passed the mantle so elegantly to her, the way she was so quick to be coming up with it, and the grassroots were able to rally around her, that we didn't have to have any sort of democratic mishigas with a contested convention. And then we got to have that wonderful convention where people really felt the joy and hope of America again. And I think we haven't felt it for so long. And I think so many Americans have forgotten that we're allowed to be patriotic without being MAGA, right? We're allowed to believe that the country has worth and value, and we should be proud of it. But that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because that's what I believe. I'm an immigrant. I came here. I believed the brochure of America. And then I lived here for long enough that I thought, ooh, we might have missed a couple marks.
But I thought we hate immigrants. Donald Trump tells us immigrants are destroying America.
Destroying them. I know. As an immigrant myself, I have to tell you, it is very disheartening to hear that kind of talk about immigrants, especially since, as far as I understand, Donald Trump is a first generation American himself. Most people they are first or second or third generation. The only people who aren't immigrants in this nation are the indigenous, and we constantly overlook them. I'm sure they're feeling quite irritated by this entire conversation. But we did the Ohio thing, and now apparently we've moved over to another swing state of Pennsylvania to demonize immigrants in that state too. Apparently it seems to be working for them.
Well, I don't know. They've been doing it from the beginning, right? I mean, he started doing it from the day he came down on that golden escalator and he went after Mexicans. He's been doing two things throughout the whole time: promoting hate and division, and also promoting violence. And he seems to be doing that right now, too. And it's got us, in a very, very risky moment. And I think that's one of the reasons the book is so timely. And I admire the fact that when in the beginning of the book, you say that the original genesis of it has roots 250, 60 years ago, at the beginning of the country. And maybe you should talk about that as a place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, last year, I was doing a PoliticsGirl podcast on the 4th of July. And I didn't want to talk about typical 4th of July things. So I was doing research on, as one does when they're a giant political nerd, I was doing research on what was going on in the time coming up on 1776 and coming up on the Declaration of Independence. And I found myself really inspired by Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which I'm sure your audience knows is a book, a pamphlet, really. It was 47 pages, written in 1776, right before the Revolutionary War, where the country was wavering. It was trying to decide if we should stay part of the British Empire or go independent. And this man wrote a persuasive argument that spoke directly to the people and addressed the nation at a crossroads. And I thought, yeah, you know what? That's where America is again, at this crossroads. So where we could go one of two ways. And I believe we have to go very distinctly down the road of, shoring up our democracy, as opposed to this sort of autocratic vision that Project 2025 and Trump and those guys have. And I thought, who is talking to the common man at this time? Who is talking about using our common sense at this time? And I thought, okay, well, why not me? And then I decided to write the book.
Well, indeed, why not you? And in fact, it's great that it is you. The way the book is broken out, and I have a copy here, I'm referring to it. But it's around 6 principles. The first is America's the land of freedom. The next is everyone should have the opportunity to rise. The third is every citizen should have a vote, and that vote should count. The fourth is representatives should represent the people who voted for them. The fifth is the law applies to all of us. And the sixth is government should be a force for good. There was a time when if you went to a publisher and said, here are my 6 principles, and these are them, they'd say, who are you? That's everybody believes that. There's no debate.
Obviously. Yeah. But that is literally where I started from, because I wanted to have 6 core principles that it didn't matter where you sat on the political spectrum, whether you were right wing, left wing, you didn't vote at all. You could agree, make America, America. And that's the point you're trying to make. Years ago, if I had said, here are 6 principles that I'm going to talk about, people would have said, yeah, that's obvious. Obviously, that's what America stands for. But the thing is that it's that simplicity, that way where we say America is a land of freedom. And it doesn't matter if you ask a hardcore American MAGA person or you ask a liberal Democrat progressive, they're going to say, yeah, America's a land of freedom. And then I say, okay, this is why we think it historically, why we believe America is the land of freedom historically. Here's where we went off track with this fundamental American principle. And here's how we get back on the path that America was supposed to stand for with its ideals. And so it seems deceptively simple, but what it gives you is not only guideposts to kind of shore up our foundation as a nation that's in crisis, but also as a lens to look at the country through moving forward. So you say, does this politician, does this piece of legislation line up with the 6? If we can all agree the 6 are obvious, basic tenements of the American society, does this piece of legislation line up with it? Does stripping women of their rights in red states to their own body line up with America as a land of freedom? It certainly does not. Does the president sits above the law line up with the law applies to all of us? It certainly does not. So we see where we've gone off track, and then I lay out actual concrete ways that we can get back on the path of American exceptionalism, if you want to look at it like that. I personally think we should stop saying we're the greatest country in the world and start trying to be it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I also think the responsibility of the greatest country in the world is to constantly try to get better. What I don't understand is here you wrote this book a year ago, and, the 2 initial principles, America is the land of freedom and everybody should have the opportunity to rise, have become the 2 central building blocks of the Harris campaign. Did you discuss that with them in advance, or did they get an advance copy of the book and they're just following your lead?
David, if I could get my book into the hands of the right people at the Harris campaign, when I sat at the DNC, because I was one of the content creators, because I'm an online social media person, I was one of the content creators that was invited this year to have press credentials at the DNC. It was the first time they'd done it. And as I sat in the audience, because I was doing breakdowns of every night, I would sit through the 7 hours and then I would break it down into 20 minutes. And Oprah came out and said, we need to have more common sense and less nonsense. Vice President Harris came out and said, we need to get back to our common sense. We just need to return to our common sense. And I thought, can someone get these people my book? Because everything that we're talking about, everything that matters to Americans, everything that feels fundamental and whole to us, that really stands for who we are, we have gotten off track. And it's so easy to do that with propaganda media, with constant fighting, with the your side, my side stuff. And I thought, here is a way for us to get back using these very 6 simple fundamental principles. There was a woman on Goodreads who got an early copy of the book, and she said, it seems obvious, these 6 principles. And yet, as soon as you start realizing where we went off track with them and how we can get back on track, it becomes very prescient. It becomes very simple because it allows people who don't have to pay attention to politics all the time a way to look at our country and simplistically break down if you're being lied to, if this is within our values. And I think that the Harris campaign really understands that. They're talking about the future, about hope, about the way our country could be if we did the right things, which comes back to Principle 6, right? Government should be a force for good. This whole idea that Reagan laid out for us, that, you know, the worst words in the English language were, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That really he was the head of the government when he said that. And if you don't think government can be a force for good for its people, what are you doing in government? Like, you shouldn't be there. And so I really feel that government could be a force for good. There's a reason we got rid of slavery. There's a reason we got civil rights. There's a reason we got women's rights. There's a reason, and it was legislation and effort from grassroots organizations and work. And I think the American people have forgot that. And I think one of the things you're talking about is we need to grow and change and evolve with the times. And one of the things we talk about in the book is that, you know, when the founding fathers when the framers wrote the Constitution and when they did the Bill of Rights, they knew we would always be a nation in flux, in change. Here are some people that had no idea that we would even have airplanes, let alone AI. So they set up a way for us to keep adjusting our Constitution and move with the times. And yet we haven't had a new amendment that really mattered since the 70s. And that's ridiculous. So I think we need to get back to our core values and really live up to them. And that's what I wanted to lay out in the book in a very conversational way, because ultimately it's a political book for non-political people.
Well, that's a real genius that you've got. You've got it on your podcast. You've got it in the book. And I'm envious of it because I tend to sound nerdier than I want to.
But that's why I love you.
Well, thank you. But I can't help it. But I have a nerdy podcast. You know, our audience is nerds. But, you know, I think anybody who reads this is going to say, I understand why she picked these 6 principles, because these are all things that are at risk at the moment. The question becomes, you know, is this a book of, you know, political analysis? This is all at risk. Or is this a manifesto that says to the reader, here's what you ought to do about it? You know, You know, what's your message for the reader besides throwing up their hands at the end and going, oh, shit, I wish I had lived at a different time in U.S. history?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no part of throwing up their hands reading this book. That's actually the goal. And if anything, to speak to your nerdy heart, I would call it a manifesto, except I wouldn't call it a manifesto. I would call it a how-to. It's a how-to book. At the end of the day,
So
that's what it is.
That encapsulates the difference between the two of us pretty well.
I love a manifesto, but I don't think that's what it is. This is a how-to book. How to understand your government, how to fix the country, how to get us back on track, how to speak to your friends and family about politics where everyone isn't screaming at each other, and how to understand where we went wrong and say, actually, we can fix that just by doing X, Y, and Z. And I want people to know it is not so complicated. It is not so hard to understand. And once more of us understand, the better off we are, because once you know you care, and change only happens when people care. So I wanted that for people. And there's an introduction, and then there's 20 pages that I just call America 101. And I say, listen, if you understand exactly how the American government works and how our laws are made and how the whole system functions, skip this section. It's not for you. It's okay. If you want to refer back to it, great. But if you're like, maybe I don't know exactly how it works. Maybe I could name the three branches, but I'm not exactly sure how it all plays out. I'll just read these 20 pages. It feels like a little nothing. And yet, if you read those 20 pages and then get into the 6 principles of the book, we literally all start on the same page, right? We all understand how the system works. I think one of the reasons that people with bad intentions get away with so much in America is because most of us don't understand. So we say, how come we, 80+% of us want some sort of common sense gun regulation, but we never get it? How come we can't get a raise in the minimum wage when clearly we're all living in poverty wages at this point? How come so many of us can want the same thing and yet not get it? Why doesn't our government deliver? And I can say to you, it's because of the filibuster. It's because of partisan gerrymandering. It's because of all of these aspects that taken together feel like I'm going to throw my hands up, forget it, I can never fix anything. But taken in pieces, you go, we could fix that. Why don't we ask for that? Why don't we hire elected officials that will give us that? And that's one of the things that thrills me about the Harris campaign is that they seem to get that. One of the first things they're saying is they're going to pass the John Lewis Voter Rights Act, and they're going to pass the For the People's Act. And they're willing to suspend the filibuster to do it. And that's to protect voting rights. And that's to get rid of partisan gerrymandering. And that's to get some dark money out of politics. And these are things that will actually change our government. If they were, if they had to answer to us again, which they haven't had to for years. If you look at Jim Jordan's district, that man hasn't had to answer to a single constituent in years. He is in a safe red district. He can never lose. And yet he's never created a piece of legislation in his life. So how does that happen? It happens through these aspects of our system that have been corrupted and aspects of their system that can be fixed if we know to ask for it.
Yeah, well, Jim is not a real academic bright light. And I think he would be challenged by schoolhouse rock level analysis of how our Constitution works.
But why would we have those people in government? Why? I mean, there's only 435 members of the House. I heard Jill Stein the other day in an interview. Jill Stein running for president. And they were like, how many members of the House are there? And she was like, our House? And they were like, yeah, the House of Representatives. She was like, I don't know, 600 or something. And I thought, oh, no, like she doesn't even know how the system works. And she's theoretically running to run it, right? Like at this point, we can't have this kind of either deliberate or malicious ignorance to people in leadership positions, but also for the people, because there's a reason Donald Trump says things like, I love the uneducated, right? Because it's easier to take advantage of us.
Yeah, and Jill Stein's not running to be president. She's running to stop Kamala Harris from being president.
Yes.
That's why she was hired, and that's why I don't know if it was the same interview you saw, but there was a very good interview by Mehdi Hassan of her, in which she said, well, why won't you call Putin a war criminal? And she just couldn't bring herself to do it. Just like
the paycheck won't come in.
Exactly. Just like Trump couldn't during the debate bring himself to say he wanted to see Ukraine win because the paycheck won't come in, because there are other forces at play here. Now we're what is it, 50 some odd days to go in this election?
Yes, and I think Thursday would be 47. Yeah.
40. So we're in the home stretch by any definition. But it looks like a lot of the issues that your book talks about are becoming more central. Issues like freedom, issues like the ability to vote, these core things are actually what the election is coming down to. Is that because Harris is framing it that way? Is that because these are the core things that are targeted by MAGA, and they've made them into the issues? Why is it so relevant right now?
I think it's so relevant because if these are the core tenements of American society that everyone could agree on, if you look at principle 2, every citizen should have a vote and that vote should count. That feels very basic to American society. And yet the Republicans are trying to, as you said, tear it down. They're trying to make it harder to vote. They're trying to suppress votes. Now they're talking about not certifying votes. So if you tear down these, what you and I have both agreed are obvious core principles of America, then the foundation, which is already shaky because we built it on, a little bit of, we built it on shaky ground. It's wonderful, a wonderful ideals of America, land of the free, home of the brave, where anyone from anywhere can make it if they just work hard enough. The shining city of democracy, the way the framers set it up so we could adjust the Constitution as time went on. These are all wonderful things, but we also had, let's just keep slavery in there for a while. We had only white male landowners can vote. When the country was created, we had some shaky foundations to begin with, but these strong core foundations, that's what the Republicans are chipping away at now. And I always feel like, listen, and I shouldn't even say Republicans, because I do not think that the party that Donald Trump represents, that JD Vance wants to run, that Project 2025 wants to write the legislation for, is a Republican party. I think it is something completely different. I think it is the MAGA party. I think it is a Christian nationalist party. I think it is essentially an authoritarian party. And I don't think that's what the Republicans were. And I always say to people like, listen, even if you've never voted for a Democrat in your life, it's what they kept saying at the DNC. You're not a Democrat if you vote for Kamala Harris. You're a patriot. At this point, there's going to be plenty of time to disagree on things like tax rates and how we best do public education after we've saved the country from rising fascism on a dying planet. But that's going to be a lot easier to do with a functioning government that's not in the middle of a religious war. So that's where I think we are now. I think we need to get really serious about the moment we're in and then use those 6 fundamental principles as a lens looking at the country moving forward.
Yeah, well, and also kind of as a basic starting point for how our society needs to be organized. And, I think, since we've organized this conversation accidentally into sort of the battle between the nerds and people who have common sense, nerds talk about political. I had a long conversation this morning with somebody talking about the foreign policy issues in this election. And I was like, nobody cares. These issues, and that there are huge, debates. Well, Trump's tariff this or Kamala Harris's housing plan that. I believe candidates should run with platforms, but that's not what this election is about. This election is about, at its core, do you think people have basic freedoms and they should be protected? Do you think that people should have opportunity to do better in this economy? Do you think people should have the right to vote, that everybody should have the right to vote, et cetera, et cetera? Your 6 principles are the bare minimum. And if you think they're the bare minimum, you have to vote one way because there's one party that's for them and there's one party that's against them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you and I have been on the same page about this for a long time. I think you can see it in our work. I feel like we both felt that this backsliding into Trump as inevitable was not the truth. And that we can see now that the majority of the country, literally from Dick Cheney on down, don't want this rising authoritarian nightmare that we're looking at, that this really is an existential moment for America that has nothing to do with, this particular foreign policy or what we're doing about this. I mean, you wrote about it in the book that you wrote called American Resistance, right? Like this time around with Trump, there won't be enough good people left to stop his worst instincts. This is it. If he gets back into power, whether he stays in power or they replace him with Vance or not, this is an existential moment because we're not getting this opportunity back. We're not getting the opportunity to vote and try and shore up our nation and make it good for everyone. They've told us who they think the country should be good for. And we would be smart to listen because it doesn't include women. It doesn't include minorities. It certainly doesn't include immigrants. And it doesn't probably include anyone that isn't a white, rich Christian male. And really you could probably put straight in there except for Peter Thiel, right? Like it's not for everyone. It's America for a specific group. And we have to, figure it out. I just think that this is such an essential moment for our country. And I feel like if people understood that, there would be no question about who they were voting for. I think America can absolutely make it if we choose to see the moment for what it is and we choose to fight. And then if we inspire our friends and family to want to fight. And if, what my book is for, if we understand enough that we can explain why we need to fight. People often say, why are you doing this? Like your rants, your podcast, your book, you're just preaching to the choir. And I'm like, I'm not preaching to the choir. I am teaching the choir the words to the song so they can go off and sing it to other people. And I often say, like you read my book, there might be people that will know things I said and never heard me speak, never read my book, but you read it, you understood it. And then you went out and talked to people so that we all got on the same page. Because if more people cared about the country the way, say, I do, if there were hundreds of me or thousands of me, or blessing millions of me, it would be great, because we would all be working to reach the potential of this wonderful nation, to live up to the country that we tell people we are, because we could have it. The question is, are we ready to fight for it?
Yeah, look, I'm all fine with there being millions of you. I don't know how your family feel about it, but I'm
maybe not me specifically. I can be a lot, but people that care as much.
Yeah, well, but there's something else that comes through here in the book loud and clear. Because these are big issues. It's a fraught moment. You get down into some core principles. But something I pick up listening to you on your podcast or talking to you in person or reading this is like I get the sense that you're fundamentally optimistic. And here we are, we're sort of at the end of our time here to talk about this. But I want to end on that note. You're looking forward at this election. You're looking forward at the next 50 days. You're talking to loads of people. You went to the DNC. How are you feeling about it all right now?
Yeah, I think that the irony is no one who has hung out with me my whole life would probably call me an optimist, but I'm also never been a pessimist. I am what I really do believe is a realist. And I think realistically, I know there are more people in this country who believe in human rights and human values and the American dream. I believe there are more people in this country who want hope and forward momentum and believe that you should love who you want to love and read what you want to read, and you should have access to your own body. There are more. You see it in every popular vote we ever have for the presidential election. That's not getting less and less. It's getting more and more. Joe Biden won by 7 million ballots, but he only ended up winning in a handful of swing states. That's a problem with the Electoral College, which we talk about in the book. But the general feeling of that is, look how many people wish we were going forward. And how do we support those people? And I think realistically, we can absolutely do it, but we need to give them the hope that we saw at the DNC. I think there was a reason that everyone felt so joyful there. And it's because you look around the room and we're told constantly that we're this divided nation, this red and blue, and we're never coming back together. And, we're the divided states of America. And then I looked around that room during the roll call, and you had people from Georgia to Florida to Massachusetts to California to, the Mariana Islands. And we were the United States of America. And everyone was there with the same intention. Let's make this country better. Let's work for everybody. And I kept saying, look at the diversity in this room. Look at the diversity. Look at the work they put into making it accessible to the hearing impaired, the sight impaired. There was a giant wheelchair ramp that went all the way down. It was for everyone. That event, this party, this moment, this ticket, it's for everyone. Everyone belongs. And the contrast is no one but us belongs. You don't belong. You don't belong. You don't belong. Let's hate these people. I hate these people. And I think realistically, the majority of us don't want that, which is how I ended up voting for the same person as, saying I'm going to vote for the same person as Dick Cheney in this election, because there's more of us that believe that America can be this shining city on a hill, but we just haven't got there yet. Doesn't mean we can't be. It means we have to work for it. And I'm not optimistic. I am hopeful and I am realistic, and I understand it comes with work. But I think when you understand that the work is not overwhelming, it's a little like a hoarder's house. I often say America's a lot like a hoarder's house. You go, here's a beautiful house, and you walk inside, you go, oh my God, like every room just looks like a complete disaster. And you think, no, this is way too much work. I can't possibly do it. We should just burn this house to the ground. Well, we're not going to do that, right? We're not going to move. We're not going to burn the house to the ground. I understand the idea that it's just too much work and you can't imagine it ever being what you want it to be, but it can be. And it's just going to take all of us rolling up our sleeves and being like, okay, let's make this a place that we all want to live. And I think that that is a possibility, both with this Democratic ticket here in 2024, but also with the majority of the American people, especially the young people moving forward. What they want from this country, we can actually give it to them if we have a government that is a force for good.
What a great way to wrap it up. I do have a criticism of the book, which is that you wrote it prior to my launching my Substack. And so in your list of recommended Substacks in the back,
but you're there. I mean,
my
your little
Substack,
name is
I'm there. No, my little name is there, and I'm grateful for that. And my kids will, I'm sure, well, they'll never notice, but somebody will. And I'm just kidding. I think one of the interesting, useful things about the book is that you do give some recommendations at the back of people that you listen to and where you get this. And so it is a practical book. And you say you're not an optimist, but you've got that kind of can-do spirit, which actually is what makes things work in this country. And sometimes, they don't work out exactly the way you intended, but they work. For example, you started out, you were going to be an actress, and here you are. You have a very big role on a very big national stage. You're all over the media. It just wasn't the way you thought it would be when you started. You just kept working. And to me, it's a great outcome because it benefits all of us.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. And I do think sometimes you just have to put your head down and do the work and then look up and go, oh, here's where we are now. And I think that's what we want to do. And I think I always wanted to do something I always had moral ambition. I always wanted to live a life of worth. And I love this country and I believe in it and I chose it and I wanted to help it. And I want other people to want to help it too.
Well, for all of you who feel the vibe that Leigh has given out now, go get the book. It is called A Return to Common Sense, and it's available everywhere as of today. So today, congratulations, congratulations on that. We will actively promote this on our website, and I'm sure you will be out there doing a ton of media. Good luck with all of that. Hopefully we'll talk to you soon, maybe after the election, and we can just celebrate a great outcome. And we can just take a deep breath and return to fighting over minor policy matters.
That would be spectacular. Boy, would I like to talk about 28% to 27%. That would be great.
With you. I'm with you. Okay. We'll carry this conversation on then. Until then, congratulations, Leigh. Everybody go out and buy the book, and we'll be back with more podcasts every day this week and every week here at the DSR Network. Until then, bye-bye.